All right, Mr. Knapp, if you're ready, I guess we can go live if we're not already, and we'll go ahead and start.
Okay, just waiting for the YouTube to start here.
Okay, let me know when.
All right, we're live.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order, and please rise for the pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll go to roll call, please.
Dr. Badger,
Present.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Here.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Here.
Mr. Gazar,
Here.
Mr. Kroll,
Here.
Mr. Musser,
Present.
Ms. Smith, here, Mr. Steiner,
Here.
and Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
Thank you. And item 204, as approved at the March 24, 2020 board meeting, the board will be continuing with the temporary suspension of portions of policy 006.1, including but not limited to the reasons for electronic participation, the number of board members who can participate electronically, and the manner in which electronic participation is requested, that they be temporarily suspended to the extent necessary to conduct needed board business. And with that, we'll move to item 205. It is recommended that the agenda for the May 26th board meeting be approved as presented.
Badger so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions, comments, changes? All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The agenda is approved. Do we have any comments from the public this evening?
I'm monitoring for hands at this point. I do not see any.
Okay, and Rick, I'm looking at like infinity windows there on your screen. I'm
Are
not
you?
sure.
Oh, sorry. Can you see the agenda or?
No, I'm looking at the latest from Bellefonte Area School District filter.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do this.
There, we could see the agenda now.
Okay.
All right, and if you could go to item 401, we'll pull up a presentation from Bellefonte Reads with Mrs. Colip and Mrs. Weinkoop.
While they're getting on, this is a much delayed report. I go back through my notes and find things, but right after Bellefonte Reads, the literacy night was held. There were a couple board members who had asked for a report about that and how many people were reached and how many books they gave out and things. That ball got dropped in the middle of a pandemic. So I had asked Mrs. Weinkoop and Mrs. Colehep to just talk a few minutes about the success of Bellefonte Reads and how well it went this year. It is a much delayed report. And I believe that Mr. Knapp is going to get them on here so they can talk about it. But that's where that came from.
No problem.
Are you able to see the Bellefonte Reads website?
Yep.
Okay. Jackie, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, I was muted. I thought I was supposed to wait for you to unmute me. That's okay. So thank you for hearing us today. Like Mrs. Burniford said, this is a little bit delayed. We were very fortunate enough to hold our literacy night a week before all of this craziness started. And so this presentation has kind of been on the back burner, but we're very excited to be here and share our success this year because it really, really is something to celebrate. So we asked Mr. Knapp to pull up just our website. We're going to go through a few talking points with some of our data and just the number of community members that attended and things like that. But our website has a ton of information on it, and that is viewable to the public. And so we'd really like to highlight a few things on that page. So Mr. Knapp, as I talk about some things, I might ask you to go to a certain page on that website if you don't mind.
Will do.
Okay, so we just want to review our mission. Our mission has stayed the same since the beginning, but our whole goal is to just foster a love of literacy within our community. We just finished up year 6, and obviously one of our biggest goals in our work is to put quality books for free in the hands of children and families. And we're really excited to share that in just over 6 years, we've given away over 6,000 free books to our community. It's probably much higher than that. We haven't been tracking the number of books that are taken from our gently used book table at our literacy night or the number of books that we put in little free libraries. So I'm sure it's much higher than that. But as far as number of books that we've provided through our One Book, One Bellefonte initiatives and some of the other things that we're going to talk about this evening, it's well over 6,000. And I think that's really something to be proud of. I had a couple of families actually reach out when the pandemic started and just shared that, you know, your event happened right before all this happened, and we were very lucky to have those books in our home. So we were very happy to hear that. Our committee is comprised of 20 members, and you can see that on our website. There's a list. It's not just Bellefonte Area School District staff. It also includes some people from the community. We have several members of the Bellefonte Women's Club who support us and help us with our work. We also have the children's librarian. We also have some people from Penn State. So we've grown over the years, but we've held about a solid 20. And every single committee member is very dedicated to supporting our work. A couple of things to highlight. We're disappointed that the Children's Fair was canceled for this June, but we understand why. But last year, which happened after our presentation at the last board meeting, we gave away 200 new books at the Bellefonte Children's Fair. So if you're familiar with that, there's lots of different games and activities. It's mostly for younger families, but families could trade in one ticket, which I think only was 25 cents, to participate in the literacy game, make a bookmark, and they could pick free books from our table. And those were all brand new, really great books. We held our second annual Jared Box Book Drive. And this year we exceeded our goal, and we brought in 297 new books. And so what happened was that we collected books at our back to school opening days for staff. We put some boxes in the Center County Library and other locations. And we also created an Amazon wish list, and community members could shop straight from there. They were shipped to us at the middle school. And in all, we collected 297 new books, and they were donated to the Jared Box Project, which if you're not familiar with that, they make little boxes that go in hospitals and emergency rooms and doctor's office to give the kids who may be sick, or even a family member who may be there with someone who's sick. And they came with our labels and a bookmark and information about our work. So we were very proud to give away almost 300 new books that way. We also added something this year, again, our whole goal being to put quality books in the hands of our community. We purchased 25 science-themed books for all ages. We had books that were science-related from pre-K all the way through adults. We had several adults who were very excited to win. And again, this was all free, but we had a table at the science night back in November. And we just gave people, as they came in, a few tickets. They could write their name on the back, and then we pulled names out of the bag to pick the winners. And we had a lot of excitement with that. So that was something new that we added this year. I'm going to talk just really briefly about our One Book, One Bellefonte event. So that was in January. And again, that was our 6th one. And something that we're really excited and proud of is that this year, the community attendance at our One Book, One Bellefonte event actually exceeded the attendance at our literacy night, which says a lot, because at our literacy night, we have lots of really fun things, and we also give away a free meal. And of course, the free meal is great, but we're all about the book. So we were very excited to see the community rallying around us. So we had over 700 guests. Our featured books were Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus, which was our middle grade book, but also available and appropriate for upper elementary and adults. We paired that with a picture book called Just Ask, Be Brave, Be Different, Be You by Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And that was really well received as well. We also did give away 200 limited copies of the sequel to Insignificant Events, which is called Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus. And in all, we had 1,100 new books that were purchased via grants and were given away to the community. We had a little bit left over, and so we put them in the Center County Library for people to pick up who couldn't make the event. And we also had enough to give every classroom teacher one of the books as well. So that was really exciting. Something really cool this year is we were able to convince, although there wasn't much convincing, they were great, but Dusty Bowling and Rafael Lopez, who was the illustrator of the Supreme Court Justice's book, Just Ask, they made us some really awesome personalized videos. That's on our website. You can click on the link that's on the flyer that Mr. Knapp pulled up. If you haven't watched those, I highly suggest you do. They're both amazing. The one from Mr. Lopez is especially cool. He took it in his hometown in Mexico and kind of took us on a tour of where he lived and kind of how his surroundings inspire him. We did reach out to the Supreme Court Justice, as you know, she's a little busy, so she didn't get back to us, but Raphael got back to us right away, and that was really cool. At our literacy night, in addition to giving away the book, we had a lot of fun activity stations centered around the book's theme. We had discussion questions. So inside the books, there was a one-pager front and back that had discussion questions for families to use as they talk about the books and the main ideas. And then we also added this year a list of additional resources. So it might be some video links that they could look up. And then it also, in collaboration with the Center County Library, our children's librarian put together a great list of books. If you liked this, then you'll like that. So if you liked Just Ask, here's some other books that you can try out and get them from our library, which was really cool. We also planned a variety of community book chats. Some of them were held at the school, some of them were held at the library. We also had a not necessarily a chat, but a place where community members could go and post videos about what they read. So in all, super successful event. We were very, very proud of the turnout, and I think we make some really great book choices. Obviously, it takes a whole committee to do that, but this year was incredibly successful, both with the number of books that we were able to give away that was significantly higher than in years past, and also our attendance just increasing every year. It went up by about 200 people this year from last year. And I'm going to let Nicole talk about our literacy night.
Evening, everyone. So just to speak a little bit about our literacy night that happened about 5 weeks after the book distribution night, we had about 500 guests in attendance for the literacy night, and we were really excited that author Dusty Bowling came that evening as well. She engaged in a Q&A session, and she signed her book. She had a really nice line going most of the night, so I know that the community and definitely the students were really excited to see her and talk with her. Jackie already talked that we do give a free dinner to the families, which I think is what really entices them to come, and have tons of literacy stations for everyone to participate in. Overall, we gave over 75 book baskets as door prizes. And again, the students earn tickets for the book baskets by participating in the literacy activities. So again, an incredible success. I think every year, Jackie and I feel like we've reached our ceiling, and it just keeps getting better and better. This was also the biggest year for grants and donations. Overall, we had 32 organizations or businesses donating. We raised $10,408.66 to make this all happen, because we really don't have any money in our budget to do this. We have to raise all the money to do it. So we're really, really excited about that as well.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Mr. Knapp, if you're able to pull up the benefactors link, I just really want to, I'm not going to call out every single organization, but just so the board and the community that may be watching can look at this, just to see the sheer amount of support. Most of them from local businesses. We did have some big grants come in. We had a great one from the Believe in Reading Foundation, which is in Ohio, that gave us $3,000. The Bellefonte Education Foundation gave us $1,000 that we were incredibly grateful for, as well as Walmart. The AAUW gave us a $1,700 grant. So we definitely would not be able to do this without our grants, and we're really hopeful that that's able to continue in the next few years. And then as he's scrolling down there, you can see some of the other local businesses and organizations that also supported us. So it really is amazing. You know, we send out a letter and they just keep coming in. And that total doesn't include, Pizza Mia gave us tons of free pizzas, like 30 free pizzas. The Coca-Cola bottling company of Milesburg gave us like free water bottles, like hundreds of them. Trinity Church chips. I mean, the Women's Club alone and Trinity Church probably made over 50 of those book baskets that are raffled off at our literacy night. And those are filled with multiple books and other fun items. So well over the $10,000 range if we're really tracking all of that. And it's not about the money for us, it's about the books, but this would not be possible without the support of the community. So it's great that they're supporting financially, of course, but we're really grateful that they're supporting us in the attendance as well. Something new we did try that we just wanted to add on. You may have seen this going around on social media or via emails. I sent a few emails about it, but being that we were stuck in quarantine, we decided to give virtual trivia nights a try, and that was really fun. We've had 2 so far. They were all book themed. And I reached out to some authors on Twitter, and one of them, Alan Gratz, Dusty Bowling, a few others, and they agreed to send us a free book, all hardcover, signed by the authors, that we could raffle off as prizes. So that was really fun. Our last one was about 2 weeks ago, and we even had multiple families actually from across the United States who found out about us and participated. So that was really fun and just something different to do. A couple of other things there, and Nicole, feel free to jump in, but every year the community response to this event just continues to amaze us. We've received a lot of positive feedback from families, and we couldn't pull this off without the tremendous support of the classroom teachers, for sure, that help out by promoting our event. We'd really like to recognize Bellefonte Area Middle School because they donated their jeans money to us this year. And that is the sole reason why we were able to bring in author Dusty Bowling, which has been a first. We've never been able to bring in the author of our featured book. And she came all the way from Arizona. And she told me a few weeks ago that we were her very last school visit before the quarantine. So we were very lucky that we were able to squeeze her in. And it would not have been possible without the middle school staff that supported us. And that's also why we decided to have her present to the middle schoolers as well on the day that she came to our literacy night. Obviously, the support of the administration and the board. I mean, this takes so much work. It takes a whole committee of people that are really dedicated to literacy. And I think Nicole and I can confidently say that we have seen a major shift in our community and how we value literacy and how we value reading. Our local Barnes & Noble rep, Steve McNeely, he tells us all the time, you guys are doing great things in Bellefonte. Like we really focus on reading there and we love that. So it's really been nice to hear. Nicole, anything else that you want to add?
Just to echo Jackie's sentiment that I think we're just so thankful to be part of a community like Bellefonte that really just values literacy. And every year we try to bring things, everything is just so welcomed by the community and supported by the community. And we're just so grateful for that.
Absolutely. So thank you all very much. If anyone has questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Always exciting to see what's going on in the reading community. So a lot of support from the community. It's very nice to see.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie. And I just have to, I'm so proud of my little Trinity church. Julie and I attend, and it's a really small church, and the members there love working on this project. And I'm just so proud of them and the school.
Yeah, kudos. It was a fabulous event. I was actually at both events, and I was proud to be a member of the Bellefonte community, and thanks to everybody. And there was a lot of people that made it possible. So really, thank you for a great event and something to be really proud about in this community.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it. And read on. If anyone ever has any book recommendations for us, just send them our way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And finishing that up, we'll move on to 402 graduation with Mr. Fedison.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So I will go through some of the various things we have planned for graduation, what we've done, what we have coming up, and I'll just try to go chronologically for everyone. Starting out a couple of weeks ago, we did get the banner with all the students, and I think after 3 tries now, I think we have it secured that it's not going to blow away or pull the soccer goal out onto Bishop Street. But that is now across kind of from the Burger King area, so that's displayed there. Again, we did go out and deliver caps and gowns about 2 weeks ago. Mr. Park and myself, Mr. Weigel was able to tag along and get some good footage and pictures as well for yearbook and things of that nature. It was great to see the students and families for those that we got to connect with. And I've been seeing lots of pictures on social media, and I have to say everybody looks really great. And so that's been awesome to see as well. Now, as we move into this week, our next event that we have planned is this Thursday for the seniors. Seniors will be returning their Chromebooks, their textbooks, their calculators, things of that nature. We are offering again this year for seniors to buy their Chromebooks if they wish. And so information was sent out to families last week on how they can do that. We will then have their Chromebooks, for those that are purchasing them, available for pickup on June the 3rd and the 4th when seniors come to pick those up. Also at that event this Thursday, we will have professional photographer on site. We plan to have 2 stations set up by the main entrance under the canopy for cover, where students can come in cap and gown, and we will have a photo taken of them, and the school will buy each graduate an 8x10 photo for their keepsake. And I'm sure that if families want additional copies of that photo, some will be available for purchase at a later date. We do have a rain date of Friday the 29th in case the weather is not good on Thursday, that we would need to move that, but we will send that information out to families of seniors if there are changes in that timeline. Following this week, the next video, I guess, release is on Monday, June the 1st. Mrs. Cyper, again, one of the videos she has put together is a staff farewell video. This is something that's been somewhat of a tradition in recent years, where any member of the staff that wants to offer advice, a farewell message, etc., has done a short clip, a video, what have you, and that will go live on our YouTube page Monday the 1st at 9 a.m. for anyone to view. As I mentioned, after that, next Wednesday, the following Wednesday and Thursday, June the 3rd and the 4th, is an opportunity for students to pick up any items at the high school. So again, if they're purchasing their Chromebook, that will be available for them. Students at that time will also pick up any awards packets they have, because we did not have the opportunity to have the in-person ceremony for awards this year. That packet will include any awards they won, monies, checks, pins, medals, all those types of things. I believe there will also be something from the parent group. Students will get their class t-shirts. The advisors in the class also ordered a Bellefonte pennant as sort of a cool retro type gift. Students will also have a copy of their graduation program as well. And we are listing the winners of all the awards in the graduation program as well. And we will post that then at a later date online for the community to see, because of course they are the biggest supporter of those awards. Traditionally, if you know, that number continues to grow every year. I don't have the final total for this year yet, but again, we can't say enough about the generosity of the community and the alumni for what they provide for the students. Also on June 3rd and 4th, students are returning ceiling tiles. So if, for everyone's benefit, several years ago, we started a tradition that students could purchase a ceiling tile to, again, do a farewell painting, message, image, and we display those through the main hallway of the school. And actually the main hallway is now full, so we're gonna have to start branching into some of the hallways. And usually there's a small fee. This year we've waived that fee. So really any student that wanted to participate in that simply had to submit a sketch for approval, and they could do that as well. Following that, that brings us to the graduation processional. So again, this has kind of been the big topic. You know, in talking with students and families, we've really tried to encapsulate what has been the most important part of graduation from the feedback they've given us. And really what we kept hearing over and over again is that families wanted some sort of in-person moment where their child's name is called, they get to cross the stage and get that photo, that video with their diploma. And so our task was, how can we best accomplish that in a safe and meaningful way? And so what we've created is basically sort of a drive-through type style graduation. I think many schools are probably doing something similar to this. Again, we talked, I think, in a previous board meeting about at 10 minutes per family, about 30 hours or so worth of time to get through that. So our setup has to be a little bit different. And so what we are putting together is we sent out a electronic sign up for families. On June the 5th, we will have time slots available from 10 in the morning until 8 in the evening. And students were able to sign up for a time slot that suited them. Students and families will enter across from the Rite Aid business. They'll be routed into the student parking lot where they'll be checked in. They'll receive their diploma and a name placard with their name and any honors that they have won or received, the cum laudes and so forth. They will then be put into a queue, and we will have 2 stages set up. There will be a stage at the end of the main entrance near the bus platform, and there'll be a second stage set up outside of the theater entrance. So if you picture rows of cars in the student parking lot, one row will be routed across the front of the school to the main entrance. The other set of cars will be routed behind the school to Beaver Farm Lane, and then up Beaver Farm Lane and turning in left at the theater entrance. And so Mr. Park will be at one stage, I will be at the other. As each family's caravan, car or 2 cars arrive, the student will get out of the vehicle, come to the stage. We will call their name. They'll cross the stage with their diploma. They can have their photograph. Families can take video, etc. And then each student will get back into their car with their caravan, and both streams of traffic will be routed to the lanes by the red light and then back out onto Bishop Street. And that will continue on for 10 hours until we get through everyone. We did allow families the option to sign up. I know some students, some families want to try to be with other relatives or friends, and so hopefully if they picked a time and can coordinate a time that is similar, they might be able to catch their friends or family members walking across the stage at that point. Again, if all that goes to plan on the 5th, the weather's good, that is our plan. We do have Monday, June the 8th as a rain date if the weather looks better for June the 8th. Same procedures would follow with that. Also then on June the 8th, we have our final 2 videos to release on our YouTube channel. One is the Seniors Friends collage. Again, that's a collage of friends pictures from school, from sporting events, youth events, all throughout their school career. And then the other video is actually the graduation virtual video, which again tries to mimic the graduation ceremony as closely as we can, including speeches from salutatorian, valedictorian, I believe the class president, myself, Mrs. Burnerford, and the graduation speaker. Each student then will have a slide with their formal photo, along with any other awards and so forth that they've won, and try to mimic that as closely as we can. And that kind of takes us through the commencement ceremony itself. Just a few other notes as far as post-graduation items. Again, we're still looking at something perhaps later in the summer. We know students, did not get a chance to go on their class trip or their picnic or prom. We're still waiting to see if those things are possible to do at a later date in perhaps July or early August. We have reached out at least to the prom venue, and that venue is available on a weekday if we can do prom. And as far as a picnic or amusement park type trip, we're still waiting on guidance from the state and whether or not those locations will be open. And then we're also looking for some sort of recognition ceremony, perhaps this coming fall or spring. So that could be at a fall football event if we can have it, or perhaps even a cool idea is bringing this year's class back to the class of 2021 graduation, and maybe in some way incorporating them together to have a moment. But those are the notes as I have up to date. We're again continuing to meet tomorrow, actually, to start going through, making sure that everybody that wished to sign up for the commencement has done that, and we'll be reaching out in case we missed anyone, and begin coordinating all the diplomas and things for that event. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Mr. Fettis and Mrs. Brookmire, I just want to say thank you. What you guys have done in the past couple months and the stress of putting things together, I just want to say thank you. You're never going to please everyone all of the time. And I think it's important that people realize just because it's green doesn't mean everything's back to 100% normal. So I think what you found was a very nice compromise. I hope that people can appreciate it, we're doing the absolute best that we can considering the circumstances. So I just wanted to publicly thank you and the team.
Yes, thank you. It certainly takes a village. There are many hands that make it all go, many people behind the scenes. And I know that was a bit of a burning question now that we're moving to green. Large group gatherings are still restricted. And that's, of course, disappointing to all of us. I think if you asked anyone on the committee or the school, we would like to just be having another Tuesday at Bellefonte Area High School and doing our normal plans. But we know that's not the case. And like I said, we're trying to do the best we can in the safest way we can. So
Well, thank you. It's appreciated.
Mr. Fedison, I know I want to say thank you too. I think a lot of the personal touches have gone a long way. I think I heard from a lot of folks about getting their caps and gowns, and I also saw a lot of excited pictures on social media and whatnot from that. I am curious though, given that we are going to green, if there is any talk about an optional type of gathering that might be able to possibly happen. I think that what you've come up with for the 5th is certainly the safest for all, given that some may have compromised immunities or family members that might. But I'm wondering if there is any kind of talk about something that might be a collective gathering, given some restrictions. I mean, I know that the restrictions that we have are they go over large entertainment gatherings is what I've read. So I'm just curious if there will be more kind of discussion of possibly something that could bring the class together, as we've talked about, maybe possibly distancing and seating, maybe limited families, obviously outdoors, but thinking about that way of it having a collective experience together, if possible, for those that would want that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wheels of the committee members are always turning. I think we've been going through that process quite a bit, over this last 8 weeks or so is what can we do? And I think, in watching the press conference today from the governor, I still think the challenge is there's a lot of things questions that aren't answered as far as, are schools open? When can schools open? We're in the green phase and they're restricted, but exactly what are the numbers and what does that look like? And so, I know that's very important to people and we can talk through those. We just need some of those other pieces of information before you can really kind of solidify a plan.
I think if there's ways to also just keep that communication kind of open as well, that helps. So as there's more information, having that available to the board and to those families that are involved, because that's what I'm hearing from a lot of families is they would like some collective experience if possible.
Sure. The only thing I think I would offer in the short term, at least with the video releases of the commencement ceremony and so forth, obviously since those aren't being done at school, families, friends can decide what works best for them on how they want to view those, if they want to do that together, and if they feel they can do that in a safe manner, that might give them some opportunity for that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Fedison? Thank you very much for that presentation and an update on graduation. It's been, I know it's been a long, hard process for you, and I would agree with earlier comments. It's much appreciated, the effort and thought that went into it. So my thanks to the entire committee and all involved in that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, with that, we'll move to 403 with Nittany Learning Services and Mr. Bean.
Yes, this contract comes up every year annually. It is for our learning services, Nittany Learning Services. We used to have Manitou that was at the CPI. Now Nittany Learning Services took over for the last 2 or 3 years. I believe the costs are the same as they were last year, and we can pre-buy spots. Now we've bought 10 spots, I think, and gotten 12, paid for 10 spots and got 12 in the past. Our number's been a little bit down, so we're going to analyze how many spots we might pre-buy this year. But everything is basically the same as it's been. Dr. Etter did review the contract as normal, and if there's any questions, be happy to answer them. It will be on later for approval. This is our alternative education placement, which is in Pleasant Gap.
Ken, the only question I had was, again, how did this compare to our previous contracts as far as the terminology, the conditions, and the cost?
I believe it's exactly the same. There might have been a few minor tweaks, but basically the exact same contract.
Okay. All right, any questions for Mr. Bean? All right, thank you for that. We'll move on to 404 Chromebook Leasing, and that's Mr. Bean and Mr. Knapp.
Okay, also on tonight is a lease for Chromebooks for the coming year. We try to lease a batch of Chromebooks, if you would, every single year so we can have a rotation of our Chromebooks. We use our Chromebooks, Mr. Neff can correct me, anywhere from 4 to 6, 7 years in some cases. We try to lease most of them. We don't lease all of them. We do try to buy some, but the majority of them we try to lease each year, and we have a rotating, a lease will come off, one will come on, those type of things. This is a standard lease that we've used, the same company we've used. They are very reliable, and it's on at this time. I know you like to see this and then vote the next meeting, but to get the Chromebooks in on a timely manner, it kind of snuck up on us, I think, and we have to get this in so we can get the Chromebooks in. It's going to be a busy summer for the MIS staff with all the Chromebooks that went home and now coming back in, along with getting these purposed for the schools. Mr. Knapp, do you have anything to add?
No, you're correct. We do use Chromebooks for a number of years. The cycle is we buy new for kindergarten, 4th grade, and 9th grade. And then the ones that come off of lease are no longer being used by the student. We use as spares while some are going back for warranty repairs. And we use them in other places throughout the district.
Now, there's also,
Does that explain that? I'm sorry. Does that explain the difference in the cost? Some are $210 and some are $245.
What we've done is we provide touch screen enabled Chromebooks for kindergartners, and they use those first grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. And then the 5th grade students and 9th grade students get non-touch screens at that point. The touch screens are more amenable to the smaller children.
and we also, it's not on for approval tonight, but I did send an email out about purchasing laptops for about 126,000, I believe 123,000. Just to talk about that briefly so we can put it on the next meeting. The laptops, again, this is very similar to the truck purchase at the last meeting. While it's cash, that total I don't like to see go out. If we want to continue with our process of replacement and on an annual cycle, we need to keep this up. If not, yeah, you cannot do it for a year, but you got to catch up eventually. And it kind of hurts you later on, because then you're buying more at a higher cost in a year that you really didn't want to. But again, we can put that on to next meeting. We would like to get those in sooner than later for the same reason the Chromebooks are on. But I did want to bring that up. So when you see it at the next meeting, you'll know what it is.
So in my understanding, we've got what, roughly total enrollments about 2,400. Does that sound about right?
2,763.
27. So what we're buying every year, we're buying what, 650 laptops, or leasing we're buying, or some combination thereof. So we have a 4-year rotation.
Or you want to use the term Chromebooks? Yes, we're leasing 650 approximately Chromebooks per year.
Okay. All right, any questions on the Chromebooks for either Mr. Knapp or Mr. Bean?
I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. You know, I kind of commented about the truck purchase last time, but the Chromebooks directly are used by the students rather than, you know, the truck was an indirect use by the students. And so for me, that makes the world of difference. Just my opinion.
Makes it easier to, it makes it easier anyways, doesn't it? All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. And next up is Mr. Bean with our budget.
Yes, can you bring that file up right there, please? I'm pleased to tell you the proposed final budget that is to be voted on this evening is at $53,225,000, which is at the 3.3% index. Now, while that's good, that's not where we want to stop. We want to keep getting this. I'd love to get it to zero. A couple things go our way, we might be able to do that. Under the current economic conditions, I think for our taxpayers, it's critical we get this as low as possible. And I'm sure everybody agrees. To go over what changed from the last meeting, we were able to talk to some people in Harrisburg. We got it on pretty good knowledge that the basic ed and the special ed funding should be flatlined. So we were able to pick up over $300,000 of revenue in that regard. I feel confident putting that back in at this stage. We also saved another $20,000 in CPI tuition. I know they've been working very hard out there. I know Mrs. Weaver's very involved out there and getting that budget down as well. So we thank them for that. We were able to consolidate 6 positions by attrition, openings we had, and collapse those in with other positions or eliminate positions and move the employee to one of the open positions, a current employee. So that was over approximately $400,000 alone as well. We, in essence, I say nickel and dime when you're talking $56 million, $53 million, $10,000, $20,000 here and there, and knock the number down as much as possible. The administration met, I think, 2 to 3 different times to discuss positions. We're still looking at some things. We don't have all the data yet. We were able to take the 3 new positions that we had and consolidate 2 of those so we don't have to hire a new body. We're able to transfer people around to cover those new positions and keep the class size to a modest level and all but maybe one incident, and that incident is 4th or 5th grade, and I think there's 25 or 26 students in that one class. So other than that, we're able to keep the class sizes still very reasonable. We also lowered the estimated teacher increase. We're still in negotiations. We did have 3% budgeted. There's no way we'll be able to do that number under the current economic conditions. So we did lower that down closer to 2%. That is everything it enabled us to get back down to the index. And like I said, I'm still looking at some things. I'm waiting for some information to come in for our health trust. I might be able to pull some additional funds from there. And there's some other things that we can talk about the next meeting. But right now we are at the index 3.3%. It is on for a vote tonight. This is per Act 1. We have to do this at least 30 days before we do the final budget approval, which right now is scheduled for June 30th. So we need to pass a preliminary, a proposed final budget this evening. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them. The other file attached is the state file that they require us to produce for anybody from the public that would like to look at it, and it will be posted on our website after we have an approval this evening.
Hey, Ken. Just to clarify, tonight is the proposed final budget, not the final budget.
Correct.
So we still have more time to get things figured out.
Yes, the final budget will be approved June 30th, and we will still continue to hopefully lower this budget, the proposed tax increase, Again, the goal, I think, is to get it to a 0%. Whether we can do that or not under these economic conditions, it's been very difficult, but we'll see what we can do. I do think I can get some money from the health, from the trust with the fund balance that we have there. But again, I'm waiting for some information from our trust administrator so I can look at that. It was supposed to be in last week, but it isn't prepared for me yet. So they're all not back to work either. So I'm still waiting on that information. I hope to have it by the next board meeting in the middle of the month. But again, June 30th, we will approve the final budget along with any tax exceptions for the gaming funds. And to let you know about that, by law, they have to certify by May 1st. They did certify, but a letter came out this week saying they made a mistake somewhere and the number is going to be corrected. I have heard estimates of 50% cut, and I'm talking the number they're giving us is over $1.2 million, I believe, right around $1.2 million. So it could be a $600,000 cut. Now, it doesn't affect technically our bottom line because it's a pass through. We don't, it's given as a net off the tax bill and we get that money from the state, but we'll get less from the state and then the taxpayers be required to make up that difference. And it's going to look like it's the school district charging that, and it isn't, but that's the way the bill's going to flush out. So I'm waiting to get that number. We're supposed to get it, I believe, next week from the state. I'm sure Mrs. Smith will probably have more on this one as well in her legislative report.
What is the enrollment numbers like for incoming kindergarten?
We're still doing that. It's been a little slow. I'd have to look at each individual school. I don't have any new kindergarten positions budgeted. I did have one early on at Bellefonte Elementary. The numbers are down. Now at that school, historically, we get a lot late. Obviously, if we do get a lot late, we'll have to add a position and find the money somewhere. But it isn't budgeted right now. And the numbers are all, I'll provide this at the next meeting, the actual class sizes, but the numbers are all in the high teens. One might be 20 or 21, but I don't even think that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Bean?
Again, that's on for vote tonight, and if you vote on it, well, we have to vote on it this evening, but keep in mind, this doesn't lock us in. That number can change, it will change, and hopefully we keep getting some good news that we can lower this number down.
So Ken, to my understanding, the 300,000 plus that you're referencing, that is the money that the feds are giving to the state. They're actually gonna, you think they're gonna keep funding level plus give us this federal money?
No, I don't think they're gonna give us the 345,000 plus. This is what they did in the past when we had the ARA funds back 10 years or so ago. They said they level funded us, but what they did was they gave us the ARA money, but then they took that same amount out of the basic ed. So in total, we got the same amount. That's what everybody's predicting is going to happen. So that's how we're budgeting right now. If it doesn't happen that way, that's going to be a nice pickup, and that will really help us hopefully get to the 0% tax increase. Again, I'm hearing different things that they might fund education on a 12-month budget, parts of it on a 12-month, maybe some on a 7 or a 5-month budget. I'm hearing all kinds of things. So till we see what happens in June, it's anybody's guess right now.
Yeah, it almost seems a little deceptive. I read the piece in the paper that even showed the exact amount, 348 plus coming to Bellefonte School District, but makes it look like we're getting $300,000 from the federal government when in essence, the state's basically taking it back in their budget.
Yeah. Again, that's what they did in the past. We just don't get that money free and clear either. We have to fill out a grant application. They give you 10 to 12 different places you're allowed to spend it. So we don't even get the freedom to do what's best for our district. We have to meet their guidelines for those funds.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with nothing else on the budget, we'll move to approval of the minutes. It is recommended that the minutes from the regular meeting of May 12, 2020 be approved as presented. Do I have a motion for that?
Krell, so moved.
Bruckner, second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any questions, problems, changes, discussion? All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner.
Yes.
Okay, minutes are approved. Thank you. And we'll move down to our reports section with Mr. Steiner on the IU number 10.
Right now, the IU, much like us, is negotiating through the C-19 world. Nothing really significant to report out at a higher level. The one thing I wanted to mention was a retirement from the IU by Val Maselli. Now, Tammy or Michelle might correct me if I'm incorrect on some of this, but Val spent most of her career, although she was a IU employee, with the district as an occupational therapist in the special education classrooms. So I just wanted to make note, one of those support staff in the district who's done a lot for the students and for the district through the years, who wouldn't get recognized by the district because it wouldn't come up on our minutes for retirements or our agenda for retirements. So that's really all I have to report from the IU.
Okay, any questions for Jeff? Thank you for that. We'll move down to Mr. Musser and the interim superintendent evaluation.
So if you look at the evaluation timeline for 2020, you'll notice that I'm already behind. So while I had put down May 22nd, I want to say that I was giving the board the weekend off. But in fact, it was Groundhog Day for me and I lost track of time. So in order not to have that happen, I have, for the rest of the timeline, I have put on my phone all the prompts needed. Having said that, June 12th, if needed, after we distribute the evaluation forms, people look at them, have any questions of Tammy. June 12th, we'll have a Zoom meeting if necessary for any questions to Tammy. And then June 16th is a board meeting. I'd like to, hopefully, and this was my projection, is that we will have an in-person meeting, I'm hopeful, where we can actually collect the hard copies of the evaluation forms in order to keep it confidential. I really abhor putting these kinds of things through, the internet, just for, safety reasons and privacy. So the other dates are 17th through 20th is to compile data, comments, goals, and I will compose a draft copy of that, and the committee will go through that and review and edit that draft copy on the 21st is actually a Sunday, but the 22nd and 23rd. And then we'll present that to the board on June 30th, the final version in executive session to the board. And then the board president and vice president will present that to Tammy at a later date, soon afterwards. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody. The evaluation form is then attached also. I printed that out yesterday, so there's a little bit of editing as far as spacing needs to go before I send that out. There's some pages that are unnecessarily used up. So I will edit that and hopefully get that out to you tomorrow. If you could print that out, I'll send it out in board docs. Hopefully you all can print that out. If not, let me know. I'll send a PDF. And that's pretty much it at this point. If there's any questions. Oh, regarding the evaluation form, Tammy did put on there the actual standard number 9 is objective performance standards. That's not typically on the evaluation form. One of the questions to us in an executive session was, how are we going to evaluate Tammy the next year if we don't have goals coming here in late June? So Tammy put on as standard number 9 something from the Superintendent's Association that will help us put some goals out there for her. I also want to say that the evaluation form is at the prerogative of the superintendent or the interim superintendent. So this was presented by her. All I did was look at it and say, yep, this is the same kind of thing we've had in the past. And so I'm presenting it to the board at this point. Tammy, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, that's about it. I got all of the information from the Superintendent's Association. So it's not like something that I've invented either. It seems to be a standard template or protocol that a lot of districts are using with the superintendent.
Yeah, this is the same evaluation form that we use for Dr. Saylor. So, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the schedule. I think that'll help keep us all on track. We are definitely in a condensed time frame given the change in environment and outgoing versus Tammy coming on board. So appreciate you keeping us on task. And let me catch my place here. Hold on. So next would be legislation with Ms. Smith.
Sorry, I always have to unmute myself. So my report is printed and it's pretty brief. I'll start off by saying that the House of Representatives was to return to session today and the Senate in a week. So I would like to get a letter sent out to Senator Corman and Mrs. Borowitz and Mr. Benninghoff tomorrow with your permission. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. I emailed everyone a copy. There are a couple of things that I think I need to tweak after listening to some things that Mr. Bean said, but we were encouraged to give our legislators our real numbers and how the COVID has impacted our school district specifically. So that's really what I tried to do in that letter. And I also heard Mr. Bean that the state budget might not be a 12-month budget, that it might be shorter. So I will get that going tomorrow or the next day, unless you, anyone has a comment or objects to your name being attached. Second is the popular Strive program. And that is when a senior citizen is able to swap volunteering in the school district with a reduction in their school taxes. So that was signed into law. That is now called Act 20 of 2020. Third, the House Finance Committee extended the discount period during which school property taxpayers may pay their taxes at the discounted rate by a month and then not penalize anyone if their payment was made after December. And finally, passed by the House so far, that the House Bill 703 that requires school districts and charter schools to publish on their websites the names and email addresses of every board member and trustee member, so the public knows who serves on the board. There's a lot of things that happen so quickly, and I try to do things, look every day to see if there's anything new that's happening. And so sometimes this is late on a Tuesday, but I try to look to see what's like hot off the press on Tuesday morning. So I apologize if that caught everyone at the last minute. And that concludes my report.
I do have a question and comment. The Strive program is apparently identical to our Smiles program. Is that correct?
Ken, can you answer that?
Yes, it is. I haven't looked at the specifics, but I believe it is.
So it's essentially an unfunded mandate, in essence, because they're requiring every school district to do it.
Yes.
So the other thing is, it's discriminatory. I've argued this ad infinitum simply because there are those who cannot handle some of the duties that would be required to be able to reduce their taxes. So I'm just putting that out there again, because I think this is a program that people don't have a misunderstanding of. This is not something that just anybody can walk in and do this and expect a $500 reduction in their property taxes.
And I talked to,
There's a limit also, I believe, to the number of people who can do this.
and I talked to Mrs. Borowitz's office, and her comment was that it's a wonderful program and everybody loves it.
I understand part of the sentiment, but I can guarantee you, at the time when my mother would have needed that, she couldn't have ever been able to apply for that program.
There are certainly other ways to accomplish the same thing, but the other big part is the unfunded piece is just one more item to chalk up into the coffers of unfunded mandates. Don, I appreciate your patience with me and getting back to you on your letter. I think it's, sometimes you don't know whether it's being heard or not, but then we go to the chat sessions that we've had with representatives in the past, and it seems like maybe sometimes a few things do get through. I really appreciate the time that you've been putting into trying to communicate with our legislators, trying to keep us informed of what's going on and keep them up to date with how it impacts us. I think you're doing a great job at that. And I'm anxious.
Thank you. I do think that ours are listening. I get the impression, and I've been told, we've heard you. We've heard you. So let's hope. What else can we do other than to plead our case?
That's a fact. All right. Any other questions for Ms. Smith? All right. Thanks again, Donna. It brings us down to 6:04 for the Elementary Building Committee. I have to say that I apologize. I thought the committee meeting minutes and the report were on the agenda. It turns out they were only on the website instead. So Leslie was kind enough to just put them on there before the meeting. For anybody who hasn't updated their board docs, you may not see them there. But if you could pull up the presentation there briefly. And I will say on the website, under the elementary building project, all of this information is there again for the community. And I think this presentation is important to try to get through, but even more so is another podcast that is a brief summary of this report and some of the highlights from Hunt Engineers. So for those interested, it would be well worth the time to take a look at the latest podcast on the website. But basically, if you can scroll down to where we're looking at costs, let me see if I can find a page number for you. So in this second committee meeting, what we did was try to pick up the, actually you can see some schematics there too. It looks like page 21. What we tried to do is, or what Hunt tried to do was take a look at the educational space needs. So the first report that they had done was mostly a look at the buildings and how to make them compliant with ADA and some of the other concerns. And that was sort of a repeat from the previous study that we had done. But then now this second one goes a step further in something that we haven't had before, but it's an important piece of the decision matrix. And that is looking at the educational space needs in each building from the occupants of that building and our principals. So they went through each building and tried to bring equity across the district in terms of the types of spaces that each building would have district-wide, not only the individual buildings. So you can see that in existing floor plans, if you go to the next page, let me see where you're at there. You're on second page. Hold on one second. Let me get you a page number. So if you look at, nope, that's existing. I'm trying to find the proposed. Sorry, I'm not a little more prepared with this. If you could go to page 30, Mr. Knapp. So this is where the first phase left off with just looking at the cost of the buildings to bring them up to ADA compliance and not really looking at equity district-wide or any of those other pieces that we were talking about. And I think we might have looked at some of these numbers at the first report of the building committee, but Bellefonte Elementary certainly being the worst case and looking at about $16 million, but overall total of roughly $33 million just to get those buildings up to an ADA compliance, HVAC, those kind of things to solve only the building issues, but not the educational piece. So then if we go down to, looks like page 34 is where some of the options start for bringing in the equity piece. And you can see the shading, for example, you can stop there, option 2 floor plan for, where is that? That would be Bellefonte Elementary. So the types of revisions that are being considered are shaded in different colors. So you can see any additions there in light blue being recommended, heavy renovations, medium and light, and you can see what they look like. But what this is looking at now is from an educational space planning, we're trying to make more of these spaces an equal size. We have a lot of larger rooms and then smaller rooms, but they don't really match what other buildings in the district have. So they tried to bring equity across the district. And I guess the easiest way to judge that matrix is a square foot per student space. You can see if you go down to the next page down there, Mr. Knapp. This is just, now these are just options that are being considered at this point, but you can see here the auditorium, for example, is turned into all classrooms. And that solves a lot of problems from the educational standpoint. And then up along the page north there, you can see the lighter modifications. There's a lot of wasted space in Bellefonte Elementary because of some of the walls that can't be moved, but the ones that can and can be equaled out in space and pick up some of the specials and other things that are lacking from that educational perspective. That's what they tried to accomplish here. And then if we continue to scroll down, let me see, to page 37 there. Yep. You can see that Benner Elementary actually needed a whole new addition on the back to solve some of their issues as far as space. And then from a security standpoint, they're looking at separating traffic instead of coming into the lobby and being into student areas. They tried to pull off the main office and principal and guidance there into a secure vestibule for visitors. And then the addition on the back is more of a community type space, most of it, so that the core classrooms stay secure and separate from community space that could be used at the same time. So those are the kinds of things that they went through. With that, we can just skip all the way down to the costs that came into that. Well, actually, if you stop at page 42, you'll start to see some comparisons on building wise, and then the charts that are there. Take a look at the inner circle would be what the existing spaces are available in a given building. And then the outer ring shows you that after the consideration of equity district-wide, how they've tried to modify the different types of spaces to bring them more equal across the district. So for example, if you look at Benner Elementary there on the right, on the inner circle, they only had 3% of their square footage was dedicated to support spaces. And after the changes, they're coming out closer to 6%, where Bellefonte Elementary remains at 8% before and after. The numbers can't ever get exactly the same just because of the floor plan and layout of each building. Some buildings are more readily modified than others. So that's why you'll still see that there's some differences in percentages of the types of space available. But that's relative to total square footage of space. So if a building has a lot of wasted space, that affects that number, like large hallways and things that aren't being used. Then they did an academic use comparison, looking at how much of the building square footage was used for academic versus non-academic purposes. And again, the inside circle is existing, the outside circle is proposed after changes. And down on the next page there, 44, you see some more of that similar type information, but it also gives it in academic square foot per academic space. So just trying to equal those out across the district, and then bring all that into enrollment and capacity. You can see that their recommended spaces there, square foot per student. There's a few areas that were a little bit light on available space per student. They're actually recommending 38 square foot per student and above. And in one case, we had spaces that are clear down at 29 square foot. So that doesn't even meet the state standards, let alone the current recommendations. So these are all the types of issues that were looked at in this second phase in trying to not only bring the buildings up to code and make them usable and solve the heating and ventilating and all those types of issues, lighting and noise as well, but also then to look district-wide from an educational standpoint and access to the education and extras, how to bring some equity to that. Of course, with all that, if you go down to page 49, there is a cost involved. And as you might well imagine, with all those changes, that puts the total project cost for all 4 buildings well out of reach of anything that we had available to us in our budget moving forward. So that's kind of where they left with the most recent phase of their updates. Now, the next challenge is to start looking at efficiencies, either by putting up a new building and doing some consolidation of 1 or more buildings and what that might look like district-wide. And then I think at some point we're going to be faced with the question of do we stick with the individual buildings and try to do some sort of a phasing plan over a number of years to where we can afford it, or do we start to look at consolidation options? We don't really know what that looks like, but that's what the team of engineers is working on next. So with that, are there any questions?
John, what's the difference between the construction cost and the total amount? I see it's incidentals, but what does that mean? And should we really be focusing on the total amount or the construction cost column?
Well, total amount in the end, but soft cost and other things come into play there, engineering, that sort of thing. So incidentals is just sort of a buffer that they put on any contract because you never know exactly what you're going to get into, especially with a renovation. So some of that falls under incidentals, but the total cost would include design, the whole 9 yards. And yes, we need to be concerned with total cost. Any other questions? Did that answer your question, Donna? Am I still on here? Can anybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. With that, my report as president is pretty brief. Again, I'd just like to thank Tammy for getting us through to the end of the year here, and looking forward to moving into the next year and hopefully finding some form of normal in there. But I really do want to say, I know that we've been getting a lot of feedback and email about graduation and other issues. And I really just have to say congratulations, first of all, to all of our seniors. And while I'm really saddened by the lack of normal in every aspect of our lives, work, school, and social, I'm really encouraged by our seniors' patience, the perseverance in this situation, your ability to adapt to adverse conditions. It's something that's going to serve you well moving forward. And I really want to thank each and every senior and wish you all the best. So I don't really have any report other than that, just to say thank you very much, and we appreciate your patience getting through graduation. So that's it for me. And with that, we'll move to Mrs. Bernifer and then the Assistant Superintendent report.
My report is rather short too. I would add before I get into it is that last Thursday, the IUs combined and Secretary of Education Pedro Rivera spoke to each regional grouping of IUs. And so I participated in that Zoom meeting. He talked for probably a half an hour, took maybe 10 minutes of questions or so, answered some of the questions that were out there, but left many, many questions unanswered. He talked about, he has a task force and they have a group of administrators, teachers, PDE folks that are developing something called a toolkit for reopening schools. And this toolkit, according to what he told us, will be a list of recommendations and options so that each school district can make it its own. I had mentioned in the past that we were going to get our own task force together, and we still do that, but I'm hanging on until we get whatever we can get from PDE before we jump with both feet into that. So that will be coming up, and his information was timely in that I feel like there must be some plan that they're making in Harrisburg now for the reopening of schools. That goes right along with my continuity of education update. Our last week of planned instruction will be next week. The choice boards will include many activities, but there'll be less focus on technology because we're having kids turn in their Chromebooks starting next week. So there will have to be less of a focus. There won't be required activities next week because the kids won't have their Chromebooks and they can't access Google Classroom. But kids who do submit assignments will receive feedback from the teachers. It's just very difficult to require assignments when the students don't have the tools that they need. So the actual last 2 days of school are June 8th and 9th. Because we can't hold summer school and summer tutoring in the normal way that we would have, our teachers are coming up with a menu board or a list of ideas that kids can use this summer to keep their brains active. Be just like an additional kind of resource for parents so that kids can keep their brains active over this long period of time. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, we will start making that plan for reopening schools based on what PDE recommends and what the toolkit says and what's best for our kids. The other item I'd like to just mention briefly is that with the cancellation of Grange Fair and the very lateness of Labor Day this year, Dr. Griffith from Penns Valley had reached out to myself and to Scott Graham over at Baldiggle and asked if we could have a conversation about changing the opening dates. If the board remembers, I also had suggested that we need to revisit the calendar. There's a few tweaks that I think we need to do anyway, especially if we apply for flexible instruction days. So I don't have that recommendation. I don't know where that conversation is going, but I just wanted to let the board know that that conversation is going to happen. In fact, it's going to happen tomorrow morning. Should there be any recommended changes to the calendar, of course, the board would have that calendar and have to approve it. So I hope to have some sort of update about that for the next board meeting in June. Again, nothing is decided at all, but I just wanted to put it out there that there are some discussions that are going to occur. Questions? I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Tammy, I just want to kind of echo something John had said earlier in terms of thanking you since you've been stepped up. Things are moving forward in a positive way. I'll say this, that when I took my daughters to the middle school and the high school to pick up their stuff, there was light in the soul. And I don't want to overstate it like this, but the people who were there, who had collected all the materials, organized it, prepared, brought it all out, you could just see they were lit up a little bit more. Like since this all started, people were just kind of droning along, but you could just see a little bit of snap or energy with the folks who were doing that. And I think that was indicative of a lot of people just for their own personal sake wanting to do something and to get active and get involved and get moving forward and be part of the solution and part of helping to get things moving forward. So just that, I just wanted to say that, I wanted to thank you, the administration, everyone who pitched in to be able to do those things. And it's a small baby step, but you can see that the heart is there, the desire is there, and people are really ready to start getting things moving again. So thank you.
Welcome.
I'd have a comment on the calendar. So as much as I'm in favor of the flexible instruction days and some other calendar revisits, and it sounds like you've addressed this, but boy, I'd really be, I think it all depends on what we're going to be allowed to do in reopening. I've seen so
Absolutely.
many crazy suggestions of what we're going to have to do, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of it too. I don't know what's even truer and what's not, but some of the things that have been going around are almost undoable. I don't know how you would do it.
Absolutely. And during Pedro's speech last week or briefing, that message was loud and clear coming from the superintendents of those two, it was IU9 and IU10, that don't put something out there that we cannot fiscally do or we cannot physically do. And so Secretary Rivera indicated that there would be a list of options and a list of recommendations. So, it's hard to tell where we're going to be 2 months from now too, which makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm coming from. I don't think anybody's opposed to late calendar revisions if they're for the benefit, but it would be really hard to, do you start back a little bit earlier, but then you get all these restrictions, or if you wait a little bit, the restrictions are gone. I don't know what that looks like, and that's up to you guys to fence that out. But I'm glad to hear that people were sticking up for the things that we can't do. There's no way you can put desks 6 feet apart. You wouldn't, what do you do with the rest of the students? Put them in the hallway, or it's just crazy. Some of that stuff was crazy talk.
I thought the most interesting one that I saw out there was that a group of students, this came from CDC, a group of students would stay with the teacher, same teacher all day long. No switching of teachers, no switching. I don't know how you do that at the high school level with certification.
Right. Yeah. So there was just, well, anyways, I don't want to belabor it. So it sounds like you're on it. And I guess I'm just saying I absolutely support late calendar changes when they make sense, but it sounds like you guys are on top of it. So thank you.
I was going to ask about metrics that are being used to kind of evaluate the remote instruction period that we've just done, and if there is opportunity to gather feedback from parents, from the community, that might inform our approach perhaps in the fall, or even approach to flexible instruction in the future, like how we're gathering some of those metrics and how we're evaluating how things went over the last several months.
That's a very good point, and we certainly can work to that end. We have been gathering the data as far as participation. The teachers have had to document almost every contact they've had with kids. We have teachers keeping track of the participation and the required assignments each week and things. But, pulling the parents might be an excellent idea, because it's interesting. Any given day, I can get one person who doesn't like what we're doing, and I can get 5 people that do. They love what we're doing. And it kind of, you tend to hear from the people that have the strongest opinions, good or bad. And so it might be a good idea to look at that. That might be something that our task force could reach out, and talk, so that as we build those plans for next year, then we can make some more informed decisions based on what has worked and what has not worked.
And I understand kind of wanting to wait for some direction from PDE, but at the same time, given how things kind of came this spring, I worry that we might not be prepared for various contingencies in waiting. So I would love to see us kind of at least thinking through, or at least evaluating some of what we did do, and then trying to figure out how we might address issues of equity across the district, access, other things like that, and having some time to do that. So my opinion would be to at least start to look at some of those things, and it may be contingency planning that may never be, but at least we've talked through or thought through a lot of things, and can kind of share some of that process with the community. along the way. So I understand what you're saying about PDE, but I do have concerns about how timely that information might be from them as well.
Pedro told us, now again, you know, PDE, but Pedro told us it would be within 2 weeks that they would release that toolkit.
Okay.
I want to echo what Julie just said
Okay.
there. I think even waiting those 2 weeks, at least having some general brainstorming session now ahead of what they're going to potentially put out in 2 weeks, hopefully, is going to be it's going to be easier on you further on down the line. Just getting all the information ahead, and I think you'll be in a better place.
We can certainly do that. I was going to mention something else too, and I forget what it was now. One of the things we have, I should have mentioned this as part of my report. One of the other concerns, and I think Mr. Musser may have even mentioned it, is that, you know, to be clear, on PD's website, the school building facilities, regardless of being green right now, are closed until June 11th, which is our last student academic day. That's what PD's guidelines say. Now, could that change? Absolutely. It could change tomorrow. It could have already changed and I didn't see it. But I think when we do pull that group together, to be honest, I'm kind of opposed to Zooms anymore. I really need that face-to-face discussion, but we can certainly start to get something set up and maybe do an initial Zoom within the next week or so. The IU is also going to come out with some guidelines. There is a committee that Diane Yabona has from the IU where they're going to work. There's a representative from each district. Ours is Jennifer Brown. They're going to talk through and try to help districts like what everybody else is doing kind of thing as we build these task force too. But yes, we can certainly get ahead of the game if you'd like.
I think it's positive to put ideas in front of them that we know would work for us so that they can build on that rather than let them decide what works for us and then we have to figure out how to make it work. So yeah, anything we can do to get ahead of the 8 ball.
Okay, we'll get on that.
All right, any other questions for Mrs. Burniford? Thank you very much, Tammy. All right, do we have anyone from the Education Association here this evening? Anyone from the Support Personnel Association? All right, if you are here and you jump in, please feel free to do that. We'll come back to you. Well, otherwise, we will now move to 701, the Treasurer's Report. I'm assuming with Mr. Bean.
The Treasurer's Report is on your agenda. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Seeing none, it'll be filed for audit.
Hearing none, it'll be filed for audit.
Oh, hearing none, it'll be filed for audit.
All right.
We got to get you a new wing person, Ken.
I know the old one is
Yeah.
he's flocking.
All right, with that, Mr. Bean, you're still up with 801, the board bills list.
The board bills list is included. If there's any question about any of the invoices, please let me know.
Actually, I guess I was looking at a different screen. So let's do this. It is recommended that the board approve the board bill list associated with the various funds for April of 2020. Do I have a motion for that?
Brookmire, so moved.
Smith, second.
Thank you. And do we have any discussion on those items? That's kind of scary, Mr. Bean, when you see $4.5 million for a month. We're over $1 million a week now to run the place. All right, if there are no comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item 901, it is recommended that the board approve the investment report for April of 2020. Do I have a motion?
Steiner, so moved.
Gerald, second.
Thank you. Any questions, or Mr. Bean, do you have anything to add?
No, other than I wish interest rates would come up, but that's not going to happen for quite some time.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. And with that, we'll move to item 1001, retirements. It is recommended that the board approve the following resignations and retirements before you. Won't read them all. We'll have a motion, then we can talk about them. Do I have a motion for those?
Badger, so moved. Badger, second then.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Comments?
Would like to say that all the positions are always significant to the district, administrative positions in particular. And I don't particularly single out a particular administrator, but anytime we lose an administrator, it is a significant loss. And to lose Gina McFalls, I think is pretty significant. And kudos to the IU for getting her.
It's going to be a tough spot to fill for sure, Mr. Musser. Any other comments? All right, I wish Ms. McGuire, Mr. Hellman, and Dr. McFalls the best in their future endeavors, whatever that may be. So with that, we'll do a roll call, please.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 1002, it is recommended that the board approve the summer painting personnel for a period of employment from June 15th through August 14th of 2020 at an hourly rate of $10 per hour. And those names are listed before you. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved, Smith?
Second, Fitzgerald.
Questions or comments?
Are we going to make sure that these folks have the appropriate PPE for the job?
They will definitely have that.
What are they painting?
Oh, different classrooms throughout the district, hallways, all kinds of things. Always something to be painted.
Great. Can't wait to see the new paint. Thank you to both of them for stepping in to do that. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Roll call, please.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser.
Yes.
All right. 1101. It is recommended that the board approve the lease of Chromebooks from VFG Leasing for the total amount of $165,825 for 48 months. That's the total cost over 48 months. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved, Steiner.
Second, Badger.
Okay, it was in the consent agenda, but are there any questions on it? All right, appreciate the report explaining that earlier in the agenda. So let's do a roll call, please.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to item 1201. It is recommended that the board approve the following donations for the 2019-2020 school year. And that is $5,000 from the Bellefonte Elementary PTO for playground repairs at Bellefonte Elementary School. Do I have a motion for that?
Bruckner, so moved.
Correll, second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. And huge thank you to the Bellefonte Elementary PTO for helping us out with the playground there. So thank you very much for that. Any other comments, questions? All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 1202. It is recommended that the board approve the contract with Nittany Learning Services for the 2020-2021 school year as attached. Do I have a motion for that?
Bruckner, so moved.
So moved, Smith.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any additional questions on this? All right, roll call, please.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Move to item 1203, the Marikey contract. It is recommended that the board approve the contract between Bellefonte Area School District and Marikey, Pennsylvania from August 1, 2020 through July 31st of 2021. Do I have a motion for that?
So
Badger,
moved,
so
Steiner.
moved.
Second, Steiner.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. And just for clarification, this is the same contract that was discussed by Dr. McFalls at our last meeting. So if nothing else, roll call, please.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 1204. It is recommended that the board approve the 2020 and 2021 bids as presented, totaling $35,578.96. A motion for that?
So moved, Smith.
Correll, second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Knapp, if you could just pull that up briefly, just for the sake of anyone watching, that they can see what kind of items are listed in there. So it's general school supplies, art, health, and phys ed supplies for the upcoming school year. Okay, anybody have any questions on that? Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Hopefully we can get all those materials in time. And we'll move down to 1205 for the cooling tower replacement. The administration recommends that the board reject all bids for the cooling tower replacement at the middle school. Do I have a motion for that?
Badger, so moved.
Steiner, second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Mr. Bartow, are you with us that you can give any feedback on this, or Mr. Bean?
Yeah, Mr. Bartow's off today. It's actually his 30th wedding anniversary. So when you see him, well, actually congratulate his wife, not him. Yeah, the cooling tower, we did bids. The lowest bid came in, I believe, right around $280,000, which was way out of our price right now, especially. We can rent it again, I believe, for approximately $8,000, give or take a little bit for the year, for the months that we'll need it. So based on the current economic conditions, we decided we would didn't want to recommend that bid and reject it, and we'll rent it for the year and we'll rebid it later on.
Any other discussion on that? I have to say that that's a pretty tough sell, that kind of pricing, Mr. Bean, when you can rent it for $8,000 a year. You'd have to amortize over quite a few years to ever pay off the $280,000. So it's a good move to reject that, reject those bids, and see if we can find out why all the bids came in that high. Are we specifying something that we don't need, or something doesn't align there? It makes sense with the rental versus the cost of installation. So thank you for that recommendation. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mr. Gazar.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 1206. In accordance with provisions of Section 687 of the Public School Code of 1949, it is recommended that the proposed final budget for the 2020-2021 school year in the amount of $53,225,000 be approved by the board as presented. Notice of the preliminary adoption thereof shall be published as required by Public School Code. Do I have a motion for that?
Krell, so moved.
Bruckner, second.
Moved and seconded. Any final comments on this?
Ken, I know you're working really, really hard on it, but I'm still going to go with no until we get it down. I just want you to know that. And I want the public to know that.
What number do I need to get it to get a yes vote?
Well, preferably 0, but I would go with 1.
Gotta have a goal.
Mr. Bean, I think you've done a great job and I am really impressed and a little relieved. I think it
second
could have
that.
gone much worse.
I'm very relieved, and I can't say enough for the administration really coming together there. It's the changes we had to make aren't great for any of them, but they came to the table. They were very honest with everything, and we were able to get it done. So my hat's off to them.
Okay, any other comments? And I guess the perfunctory reminder, Mr. Bean, that we still have a chance to make changes and reduce this or change it just change it if we need to. So just that reminder. All right, with that, roll call, please.
Mr. Kazar,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
No.
Dr. Badger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bruckner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to item 1301, another chance for public comment while we're doing these virtual meetings, just in case anybody missed the opportunity earlier. Do we have any comments from the public?
At this point, I am not seeing any.
Okay. And you didn't see anything in email either?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to items for future discussion from the board members. Anything we want to bring up for the next meeting?
Mr. Musser had kind of alluded to this earlier, and I'm sure you've kind of tossed this around a little bit, John. And maybe, you know, there's a simple answer or simple metric to it, but any thoughts relative to us doing in-person meetings, you know, when that might be in the future?
Well, I think in the green phase, we're allowed up to, we're even above 25. The only real limitation we had at this point was the school buildings were still to be closed until July 11th. So, or I mean, June 11th, right? So I think we were trying to get, you know, past that point, or I think Tammy might even be looking for further clarification as to what we can do in the buildings. So I'm not opposed to in person, even if we have to have it at an offsite location, but that's certainly something that we need to look at moving forward.
And in the middle school cafeteria, I mean, we have access to that room directly from the outside. So if we're just in the cafeteria, would that be okay?
I think I'd defer to Mrs. Berniford to see what, how that turns out from PDE.
And I would,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, Tammy, go ahead.
At this point on PD's website, again, I check it daily. It says that schools are closed until the last student day. For us is June 11th. So the next board meeting is scheduled for June 16th. So I think, again, this is just my opinion, but I will check more into it, that you should be able to hold your meeting in the middle school. We can easily socially distance at 6 feet apart. And as somebody mentioned, we'd only be in the cafeteria. There's an exterior entrance. I think that it would be doable. And I don't see at this point any prohibiting from PDE. In fact, maybe they'll release or ease those restraints a little bit. I don't know. But at this point, I think your meeting on June 16th could conceivably be held in person.
Yeah, I think one of the other big limiting factors is if we are in that kind of an environment, you know, we have the whole mask issue. It's pretty hard to hold a board meeting with a mask on. So we just need to make sure we look at all of the limitations or restrictions to meeting there or anywhere for that matter. But I'm in favor of in-person meetings far more than virtual.
Well, my only comment is I would not be comfortable at all in the seating that we had prior. I would want a lot more distance between me and anyone else. So it would have to be a much better seating arrangement than what we had been using prior.
I'll make sure if it's the issue, I'll use more deodorant or something, Chris.
No,
No, I don't know if that's.
You know, I love you and Donna and all, but I don't want to get sick.
Well, let's just say that it's something that we need to continue to look at. And even if we need to do some of these things in with the evaluation where we need to have an exec session, we don't need to meet on school property. We can meet wherever we decide to and just make sure that everyone's comfortable with the environment and the seating, et cetera. So let's just leave it for now at saying that we're going to continue to look into it and move to face-to-face as soon as possible.
And I will look into it with PDE as well and send you information as I get it.
Okay, any other comments on that or other items for future discussion? Okay, hearing none, I have to say that we did meet for an executive session prior to the meeting, as you saw on the agenda, and we're going to retire to an executive session here. We'll take a 5-minute bio break, and then I'll start the executive session meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I don't know if we can do an all in favor. Aye.
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 Were there any opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, and see you in 5 minutes for exec session.